I came to surprise my family on Christmas Eve. From the window I heard, "Pretend we're not home." So I left and took the $29 million surprise back with me. I used to design flight control systems for fighter jets. Now, I am the woman my son calls a burden. I stood alone in the snow on Christmas Eve outside his pristine townhouse on the Upper West Side of New York. I had taken a red-eye flight from Arizona just to surprise them. I had not seen them in over a year. The last time we spoke on the phone, his voice was clipped, impatient. "Mom, things are hectic right now. We will call you once things settle down." But they never did. Not for birthdays, not for Thanksgiving, not even when my arthritis flared so badly I could not hold a fork. I brought a small red suitcase. Inside it, I packed handmade cookies, a scarf I had knitted for my granddaughter, and a single manila folder, the one that held the deed, the transfer papers, and the investment certificates worth $29 million. It was not a gift I planned to announce with fanfare. It was going to be a quiet blessing, just like the decades I spent making sure they had everything they needed. The snow was light but biting. I wore my heaviest coat, but the cold still reached my bones. I stepped up to the door and pressed the bell. The chime echoed once. I heard laughter from upstairs, the clink of glasses, music playing softly. A child giggled, then the voices. A woman's voice first, my daughter-in-law. "Who is that? Did you invite someone else?" Then my son. I knew that voice. Even behind the closed window, I could still hear every word. "Pretend we are not home. I cannot take it tonight. My mother acts like she still has some place in this house, like she still matters." There was a pause. "Just mute the bell. Close the blinds. She will go away." I did not move. My hand was still on the handle of my suitcase. My legs trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of those words. A moment later, the music grew. Louder. I heard the blinds being drawn. The porch light turned off. The house, which had been full of light and warmth just seconds earlier, now looked cold and dark from where I stood. For a brief second, I considered ringing again, knocking. Maybe one of the grandkids would recognize me, open the door with a smile, wrap their little arms around me. But I knew better. This was not the first time I had been dismissed, just the first time it was so blunt, so public, and so final. I turned around slowly. My boots crunched against the snow as I stepped down onto the sidewalk. I felt the wind pick up just as I reached the gate. The red suitcase tipped slightly, and the top flap opened. A corner of the manila folder poked out, the edge of a legal document fluttering in the wind. I knelt to close it, and as I did, I paused. That folder was meant to change their lives. $29 million earned, invested, reinvested, and protected by a woman they had come to call irrelevant. I had planned to hand it to my son that night. No ceremony, no speeches, just, "This is yours. Use it wisely." But not anymore. I stood again, zipped the suitcase tight, and walked down the street. My breath fogged in front of me. But inside, I no longer felt the cold. I felt something else entirely. I felt clarity. They thought I was old, disposable, powerless. But they forgot something. The quietest person in the room is often the one who remembers everything. And I remembered everything. I remembered the sacrifices. I remembered the nights I stayed up until dawn writing code. Back when computers filled entire rooms and the military refused to believe a woman could contribute to defense technology. I remembered carrying him to the hospital when he broke his arm while his father drank himself into another stupor. I remembered skipping meals so he could attend science camp. And I remembered how proud I was when he became an engineer. I thought he inherited my mind, my fire, but I was wrong. He inherited my fire, yes, but not my heart. They called me a burden. They forgot who built the bridge they walked on. They forgot who taught them how to cross. I did not cry as I walked. Not that night. Tears would have been wasted. Instead, I pulled out my phone, booked a room at a quiet hotel near Central Park. I ordered soup, a soft bed, and silence. And before I slept, I took the folder from my suitcase and set it on the U desk beside me. I looked at it long and hard, and I whispered to myself, "It is still mine, and now I get to decide what kind of legacy it will become." Outside, the city glowed with lights and joy. Inside, a grandmother slept peacefully for the first time in years, knowing that the people who shut the door on her had just shut the door on everything they never knew they needed, and she was finally free. They never asked what I did before I became a mother. It was as if I only began existing the day I gave birth, as if the woman I was before had evaporated into the ether the moment I held my baby boy in my arms. But I remember her. I remember me. I was 22 when I was accepted into a classified government program focused on computational systems for military aircraft. It was 1962. I was one of only 3 women in the room, and the only one not assigned to secretarial duty. My professors had vouched for me. They said, "She doesn't speak much, but when she does, you'd be wise to listen." I wrote my first flight, algorithm by hand on lined paper with a mechanical pencil. There were no modern monitors, no keyboards. We coded with punch cards and stacks of paper taller than we were. I used to sit for hours mapping equations for angle correction in supersonic speed adjustments. It was math that could make or break a jet's mission. 1 decimal off and a pilot could be dead. I was good. No, more than good. I was precise, relentless, quietly exceptional. By 24, my work had been integrated into the early radar feedback systems on U.S. fighter jets. But no one outside the lab would ever know. Our names were not printed, and we were told not to speak of our contributions. Secrecy was part of the job, and I accepted it. I believed I was helping protect something bigger than myself. Then I got pregnant. I still remember the meeting. A man in a gray suit, 20 years older than me, looked down at the swelling of my belly and said, "You will need to step away. A woman in your condition cannot be around this equipment. What if you faint? What if the stress affects the child?" I asked, "What about my clearance?" He folded his arms. "You'll be suspended temporarily. We'll reevaluate after the birth." They never reevaluated. Once the baby came, the badge never came back. My security access was revoked, my name taken off the rosters. I was thanked for my service and told to be proud of being a mother. As if one role canceled out the other, I left quietly. I did not fight it. There was no system in place for women like me to fight anything. And I told myself, it's okay, you can do both. You will raise him to carry the torch. He will know who you are. But he never did. When my son was 3 months old, I sat at the kitchen table with my old slide rule, helping a neighbor's boy prepare for a math competition. I had to pretend it was just a hobby. When he turned 1, I baked a cake with the same hands that once programmed the speed of descent for an F-4 Phantom. I wrote hundreds of thousands of lines of code in my youth. But after my son was born, the only thing I wrote were grocery lists. No one ever asked if I missed it. No one even imagined I had once been anything else, and I let them forget. My husband suffered a stroke at 50. I became his nurse. My mother-in-law developed dementia. I became her guardian. The house became a silent ward, and I am the quiet caretaker. Every beep from the medical machine, every unsaid resentment settled into my spine like bricks. Still, I carried on. When the school cut math classes, I pulled out my chalkboard from the garage and taught my son myself. Night after night, we sat at that dusty board while I showed him how to break down algebra like it was a second language. He had talent, not my precision, not my hunger, but enough. I thought he saw me. I thought he noticed the way I could solve quadratic equations faster than the teachers at his school. I thought he'd ask one day, "Mom, how do you know all this?" But he never did. To him, I was just the woman with chalk on her hands. Always. Home, always tired, always available. He grew, and with each passing year, his questions dwindled. His assumptions grew. He began to see me the way the world had trained him to: invisible, domestic, done. He never asked why I never had a job. He never questioned how the bills were paid, even when his father could no longer contribute. He never noticed the long nights I spent balancing accounts, learning the stock market quietly through the public library, investing what little I had left from my past life into portfolios that over decades grew into millions. I clipped coupons and bought thrift store clothes while watching my investments quietly multiply. He went to college. I paid for it. He got married. I helped with the down payment. He had children. I sent checks for every birthday, every holiday, every lost tooth. But when I spoke, it was always, "Thanks, Mom," and then back to their world. The last time he visited me in Arizona, he spent most of the trip on his phone. I made his favorite dish, beef stew with thyme and red wine. But he picked at it, said it was too rich for his diet. When he left, he kissed my cheek and said, "Take care of yourself, okay? You're not getting younger." I nodded. I always nodded. I was the quiet mother, the steady presence, the unpaid provider, the forgotten genius. I do not resent him for not asking about my past. I resent that he never once believed there was one. And now he sees me as a burden. He thinks I am here because I want to cling to the past. He does not realize I was the past he is trying to escape. He does not know that the systems he now patents are distant echoes of the ones I helped create. But I know. I remember. And memory, when buried long, enough does not fade. It sharpens, it waits. When the time is right, it rises. 3 days before Christmas, I called my son. The line rang 4 times before he picked up. His voice was clipped, distracted. "Hey, Mom, is everything okay?" I smiled even though he could not see it. "I was just thinking I might come up to New York this year, surprise you all for Christmas." There was silence on the other end, followed by the sound of movement, like he was covering the phone. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted. It was polite but tight. This year's a bit complicated. We're hosting a few people, clients actually. Big names from the firm. It's kind of a full house." I paused. "I can stay in a hotel nearby. I just thought maybe I'd drop by on Christmas Eve, bring the kids some treats." He exhaled a long, quiet sound I had heard many times before. Half exhaustion, half annoyance. "Mom, I'm not sure that's the best idea. It's going to be a bit of a circus here. The girls are running around. Jenna's stressed. I've got calls lined up. Maybe we should plan something after New Year's when it's less hectic." I did not argue. I never did. I simply said, "Of course, I understand." But I still packed my bag, not out of defiance, but out of instinct. Some things a mother does, without permission. I packed my red dress, the one with small embroidered roses, the one my husband once said made me look like I carried the holidays in my smile. I baked 6 dozen cookies, molasses spice, his favorite since he was 10. I wrapped them carefully, in parchment paper and twine. And then I reached under the floorboard of my closet and pulled out 3 things: a battered laptop, 10 years old, still functional. Contained in its drive was a digital archive of my old projects, raw data, scanned punch cards, letters of recommendation, time-stamped memos. It was everything I had from my years as a military systems developer. A small wooden box. Inside, a collection of yellowing pages, blueprints, hand-drawn schematics of early flight control systems, my handwriting, my calculations, stamped confidential in faded ink. They were my original drafts, the same ones I used as a foundation for a system I would later watch my son adapt for commercial aerospace. And lastly, a slim black USB, encrypted. On it, a compiled report that linked my historic work to patents currently filed under his name. He never asked how he knew what he knew. He assumed it came from talent, from blood, and maybe it did. But talent needs a foundation, and his foundation was mine. I placed all of it carefully into a second compartment in my suitcase, away from the cookies and scarf. On top, I laid a crisp manila envelope, the new version of my will. I had updated it just 2 weeks prior, a new beneficiary, a new legacy. I booked a flight for the 23rd, landing in New York just after sunset. The city was lit up like a dream, storefronts bursting with gold and green, snow dusting the sidewalks. My cab driver was young and kind. He helped with my suitcase and asked who I was visiting. "My son," I said, smiling. "I'm surprising him for Christmas." He nodded, chuckled. "Hope they've got cookies." "They do," I said. "They just don't know it yet." At the hotel, I rested. I checked the weather. I reread my letter to the estate attorney. I looked through the old documents, touching the edges like they were bones of a past life. I watched a video of my granddaughter's last recital sent by the school, not by her parents. Then, on Christmas Eve, I dressed. The red dress fit like a memory. I brushed my hair back, pinned on a brooch shaped like a snowflake he had given me when he was 7, bought from a school holiday fair. It still sparkled under light. I took the subway to their street and walked the last 2 blocks. Each house was glowing, each window a scene from a postcard. Families laughing, eating, embracing. When I reached his doorstep, I adjusted my scarf, pulled my coat tighter around me, and rang the bell. I already knew what was coming. But some part of me still hoped. Some part of me was still the young mother waiting for her boy to come home and say, "Mom, I get it now. I see you." But that night, the only thing I saw was a shadow in the upstairs window and then the blinds shutting me out. I stood on the porch, holding the red suitcase in one hand and the tin of cookies in the other. The wreath on the door was fresh, pine, and cranberry, elegant, expensive. A small plaque beneath the doorbell read, "The Lennons, my son's name, not mine." I pressed the bell and waited. Inside, I heard footsteps, laughter, then silence. Moments later, the blinds on the tall front window shifted just slightly, just enough for someone to peek through, and then a small face appeared. It was her, my granddaughter. She must have been 6 now. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. She pressed her tiny hands to the glass and squealed, "Grandma, Mommy, Daddy, Grandma's here." My heart lifted just for a second. That brief, beautiful second when a child remembers love before learning shame. Then I saw my son. He rushed into view, crouched to her level, and gently pulled her away from the window. I could see his lips, moving, firm, stern, rehearsed. "No, sweetheart. Grandma's not staying. Go help Mommy in the kitchen." "Okay." She hesitated, then nodded. He stood. His face came into view fully now, just behind the glass. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, sharper. Maybe it was the angle, maybe it was the light. He didn't open the door. He just looked at me. I smiled and gave a small wave. He didn't wave back. I heard the door unlock, then open just slightly, an inch, 2 inches. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hushed but laced with irritation. "We want peace this Christmas." I opened my mouth to answer, to say I brought cookies, or I missed you, or even just hello, but I never got the chance. Jenna, my daughter-in-law, appeared behind him. She was dressed in a shimmering cocktail dress, holding a wine glass. "Oh," she said flatly. "Hi, we weren't expecting—" She didn't finish the sentence. I nodded. "I just wanted to surprise the kids." Jenna glanced toward the living room. "We've got guests, clients from Ethan's firm, big names. It's not really the best time." "I won't stay," I said quickly. "I just thought maybe I could drop these off." I lifted the tin of cookies. She didn't take it. My son turned to her, whispered something I couldn't hear. She looked back at me and smiled, a smile like froth. "Mom, you're here. You should understand. We have important guests. You shouldn't make things difficult for us." I held still. I wanted to say, "It's just 5 minutes. I'll sit in the corner. I'll be invisible." But then my son said something that stopped me cold. "Just act like she's not there. She's used to being invisible anyway." He said it as though I wasn't there, as though I had always been the inconvenient background noise of his life. Not a person, not a presence, just a static hum he had learned to tune out. That was when I realized he had not just grown up, he had outgrown me. He thought. I belonged to a part of his life he had outlived, like a toy or an accent. I looked down at the cookies in my hand, then up again. They were already shutting the door. No goodbye, no thank you, no Merry Christmas, just the soft click of a lock turning in place. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. The wind picked up, swirling snow around my boots. I turned. Slowly, walked back down the steps, my shoulders straight, my heart breaking with every step. At the bottom of the walkway, I stopped. I turned back to look one more time. Behind the curtain, I saw the flicker of movement, laughter, toasting glasses, music starting again. They had gone back to their party, back to their lives, as if I had never been there at all. So I walked away, not quickly, not angrily, just, finally. 3 days after Christmas, I sat alone in my hotel room, sipping chamomile tea and staring out the window as soft snow fell over Central Park. The red suitcase rested by the door, untouched since the night I left their doorstep. On the desk beside me sat my old laptop, humming gently, the screen opened to a blank email draft. I had not slept much in the nights following their rejection. Not because of heartbreak, I had already buried that years ago, but because my mind was awake in a way it had not been for decades. There was clarity now, precision, a cold, sharp purpose. I opened a folder labeled Trinity Archive. Inside were scanned documents, memos, hand-drawn schematics, blueprints I had created with my own hands, some dated as far back as 1963. All of them bore my name, my calculations, my signature. I scrolled through images of radar loop configurations, angle correction models, and a particular system optimization equation I had once scribbled on the back of a sandwich wrapper. I recognized that formula because I had seen it again, almost. Word for word on a patent my son had proudly shared in an article last year. He had built his company on it, rebranded it, monetized it without once mentioning me. I opened a second folder labeled Proof. This one held comparative documents, my original schematics versus the modern ones registered under his company. Even a child could see the lineage. The structure was identical, the equation roots unchanged. He had not created a new system, he had modernized mine. I minimized the windows, took a deep breath, and opened my contacts. There she was, Helen Morris. We had met in 1961, two of the only women in our cohort. She had gone into science journalism while I dove into defense. She had spent the past 40 years writing exposés on scientific ethics and academic misconduct. We had not spoken in years, but I remembered something she once told me in a cafeteria back in Cambridge. Truth always waits for the right moment, and when it arrives, it cuts cleaner than any blade. I typed, "Dear Helen, I do not know if you remember me, but I have a story, and this time I am ready to tell it." I attached the files, the documents, the comparisons, the encrypted USB contents. I ended the email with one line. He took my work, my silence helped him build it, but now I am done being quiet. I hit send. 48 hours later, I received a reply. Helen wrote, "I remember every word you ever said to me. I've just spent the last 10 hours going through your files. What you have here isn't just a story, it's history. Let's make it loud." The story went live on New Year's Day, front page of the Science and Tech section. The mother of flight control. How a forgotten female engineer was cut from her own legacy. Subheading, "She designed it, he patented it. Now the truth is coming home." Within 24 hours, the article had over 2 million views. By the third day, it made the front page of the Sunday Times. The article detailed my original contributions to the early radar and flight control systems. It laid out the timeline of my government clearance, my forced resignation upon pregnancy, and the quiet decades that followed. And then it drew the line methodically, precisely, from my blueprints. To the modern patents held under my son's company, they quoted me in the final paragraph. He is brilliant, but brilliance built on stolen bones is not legacy. It's theft. The fallout came fast. Investors began pulling out of the company. Social media exploded with outrage. She wrote the code. Trended for days. University ethics boards began requesting a review of his honorary doctorate. The military contractor associated with his firm paused their renewal discussions. A formal inquiry into intellectual property origins was announced by the U.S. Patent Office. And then came the letter. A formal summons to appear before the Scientific Integrity Board for a hearing on ethical violations and potential fraud. My son was stunned. He issued a carefully worded public statement about admiration for his mother's past and possible misunderstandings in historical documentation. But it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle, and this genie wore glasses and carried blueprints. I watched it all unfold from a quiet corner of the world. No press conference, no public feud, just one woman, one room, and a truth long overdue. I did not gloat. I did not scream. I just smiled because I knew the loudest revenge is the one whispered in proof, not rage. He had erased my name from his story. So I wrote it back in one document, one equation, one headline at a time. The invitation came on thick cream paper, embossed with gold lettering and the seal of MIT. I stared at it for a long moment before reading it aloud. You are cordially invited to deliver the keynote address at the MIT Women in Science Recognition Gala, honoring those whose work has silently changed the course of American innovation. I held the paper in both hands as if it might dissolve. 60 years after they erased my name, they wanted me to speak. I arrived in Cambridge on a bright spring day. The campus was alive with blossoms and the low hum of minds in motion. As I stepped onto the stage of the auditorium, my legs trembled. Not from age, but from the sheer weight of the moment. The crowd rose, not for a politician, not for a CEO, but for me. Behind me, projected on a screen that reached from floor to ceiling, was a black and white photograph of a young woman with thick glasses and tightly pinned hair standing at a blackboard filled with equations. Me from a lifetime ago. I spoke. For 20 minutes. I spoke of silence, of motherhood and machines, of the cost of being brilliant and invisible at the same time. I did not cry. I did not accuse. I simply remembered out loud and let them remember with me. At the end, the audience stood again. But this time, I did not tremble. I stood tall and nodded, not for applause, but for acknowledgement finally earned. A week later, I received a call from NASA. They wanted permission to use that photograph in the new Hall of Honor at their headquarters. We're launching an exhibit, the director said, to celebrate the pioneers we failed to credit the first time. They printed my image 10 feet tall, hung it beneath the words, "She calculated silence into history." Visitors stopped and stared at that image, at the equations on the board behind me. Some wept. Young women took selfies. Girls in science clubs posted tributes online. They finally saw me. Meanwhile, my son's company collapsed. After the hearings, after the exposés, after the lawsuits, no investor would touch them. Contracts were voided. His top engineers left. Then came the lawsuit, a class action filed by shareholders, alleging willful deception and intellectual property theft. Depositions revealed emails that referenced my notes, my name, my work. He had known. He had always known. His defense team crumbled. Eventually, he resigned from the board to protect the company's remaining dignity, though there was nothing left to salvage. He disappeared from the press. The man once lauded on magazine covers now avoided airports where the headlines still looped on screens. Then came the final twist. The STEM equity fund I had quietly helped build after the article went viral, the Trinity Foundation, began accepting grant proposals for new engineering research. The foundation, named for the file, that had once lived silently in my laptop was fully endowed from the very fortune I had once intended for him. His name appeared among the applicants. He had submitted a proposal, a technical design, a funding request for a fraction of what I used to keep in savings just for him. My board reviewed the file quietly. They passed it to me. I flipped through the proposal. Clean, intelligent, but it stank of desperation. In the final review notes under recommendation, I wrote one sentence: rejected. Applicant does not meet the foundation's standard for academic integrity. It was not vengeance. It was simply truth. He had burned the bridge, and now he stood at the riverbank, wet matches in his hand, wondering why no one came to ferry him across. I never spoke to him again. He never called, never apologized, but I heard from my granddaughter. She sent a letter. She said, "Grandma, I read about you in my science class. I didn't know you were so amazing." I wrote back. I said, "Now you do." She responded with a picture she had drawn. A girl at a chalkboard, glasses on, hair up, smiling. I keep it in a frame beside my bed. Some days I wonder what life would have been if they had just opened that door. But most days I'm glad they didn't, because when they shut me out, they set me free. And now my name is written where it always belonged, in history, in legacy. And this time, it will not be erased. 1 year later, almost to the day, I found myself back in New York, not at their house. That door was closed forever, and I had long stopped wondering what might be behind it. No, I was there at the invitation of the Metropolitan Science Archive, where a new exhibit had just opened, Women Who Engineered the Future. My story had a wing to itself. They flew me out first class this time. My name was spelled correctly on everything. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a young woman approached me. She had tears in her eyes. She was maybe 30, with an engineering badge on her coat. She said, "I changed my thesis because of you. I didn't know women like you existed." I smiled and said, "We always existed. They just did not write us down." That was the theme of the year. Being written down in museums, in textbooks, in podcasts, and panels, and award ceremonies where they now knew better than to overlook the grandmothers of innovation. One publication named me Silent Trailblazer of the Year. Another printed a spread of my handwritten equations, side by side with the modern systems derived from them. For the first time, the world was reading my name without parentheses. Back home, my days were quieter. I had started teaching again, not in a classroom, but at the local community center. Just a group of older women, most retired, some recently widowed, all curious. We met every Wednesday for Engineering for the Eclipsed. That was their name for it, not mine. They wanted to understand what had been taken from them, what they had been discouraged from loving: math, code, machines, ideas. Each time one of them grasped a concept, their face lit up like a girl discovering she could speak a language she had been told was foreign to her. We cried often, not from frustration, but from awakening, and each week I felt a little more complete. Until one afternoon, as I was packing up, a woman lingered at the door. She looked hesitant, pale, her purse clutched too tightly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't want to interrupt. I just recognized you from the news, from the gala." I nodded, smiling politely. She stepped closer. "You don't know me, but my husband worked with your son." Ah, there it was, the past knocking again. "I won't stay long," she said. "I just thought you should know. They're divorcing your daughter-in-law and him." I blinked. "I see." There were a lot of things, she added, her voice softening. He blamed the fallout on everyone but himself, got paranoid, started lashing out. She took the kids and moved out 6 months ago. I nodded. I hope they're doing better. See, she said then after a pause. Your granddaughter, she joined a science club. Her mentor cites you in every lesson. That hit me harder than I expected. I thanked her. She left, and I sat in the empty room for a long time. Not sad, not triumphant, just still. That night I received a call, a blocked number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello? There was silence at first, then a breath, and then it's me, his voice, hollow, older. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he said. I know I lost that right. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. It wasn't rehearsed this time. It cracked, broke, fell apart between syllables. I destroyed everything, he said. The company, the trust. I even ruined my marriage. He exhaled sharply, like it hurt to admit. I used to tell myself I earned it, that it was mine to take, but it wasn't. And I see that now. I said nothing. I let the silence speak for me. Then he said something I did not expect. I started teaching, high school level. Engineering basics pays nothing, but it feels right. He paused again. I used some of your old lessons, the chalkboard methods. I tell them where I learned it from. I tell them about you. I looked out my window. The desert sky was full of stars, the kind of clarity that can only come from distance. I'm not asking to come back, he said quietly. I just didn't want another year to pass without saying the words. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Then I said simply, thank you. We did not speak again after that, but that night I slept deeply. Not because he apologized, but because he changed. That was all I had ever hoped for. Change, truth, continuity. Weeks later, a package arrived. No note, no sender listed. Inside, a small framed photo of my granddaughter holding a medal from her school's engineering fair. She stood next to a trifold board titled Legacy Systems, From My Grandmother to Me. In the corner, a quote written in Sharpie. She taught planes to land and women to rise. That picture now sits on my shelf, right beside my patent acknowledgement. Plaque, right beside my quiet. Because revenge, you see, is not the end. It is the beginning of truth. But what comes after, what you build from the ashes, that is the real legacy. And mine lives on in a little girl's science fair smile, in a teacher with regret in his voice and chalk on his hands, in the names etched into scholarship plaques, each one beginning again where I was once told to end. This is not a happy ending. It is a just one. And that, my dear, is better than any apology. That is history reclaimed, and now it's ours. I do not need anyone to thank me anymore. I do not need flowers, applause, or medals. I do not need their approval. I just need them. To know I was here, I existed, I created. I carried a nation's defense on my back, then carried groceries home for a family that forgot. And yet through it all, I endured. Because brilliance does not disappear when it is ignored, and wisdom does not expire when it is aged. The world tried to erase me. My own blood tried to silence me. But I remembered. And now the world remembers too. To every woman who was told to be quiet, to stay small, stay soft, stay out of the way, I say this: stay strong. Write it down. Keep the records. Because one day they will ask, where did this come from? And your truth will answer. Even if your voice is gone, this was my story. One of many. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or forgotten, then you belong here too. Subscribe to the channel Her Side of the Story, where silence becomes strength and the quietest woman in the room finally gets the last word. Because revenge has no expiration date and wisdom never fades.